Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Voices of Empowerment with Dr. B. I am your girl, Dr. Bianca, Miss B. Lee. And man, oh man, it has been quite some time, you all. We had our full month sabbatical, and I hope you utilized it for exactly what it was purposed to do, and that was to reset, to deconstruct, to reconstruct, to relax, to restore, to reflect. All of that was what that season was for. And I'm so excited that you all did that. I did miss you. I would be remiss if I didn't say that I did, because I absolutely did. I miss going live. I miss communing with the community. And all of the good things, you all. Hello. We are airing live on multiple platforms simultaneously. We are on Clubhouse. We are on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all of the things, TikTok, everywhere. We are everywhere, you all. And I thank you all so very much for wherever you're listening from and viewing from. Thank you for being here, whether you're listening live or you will be listening in the replay. I thank you for your presence, okay? You all know how we do here. If you're new to the place, welcome. This is Voices of Empowerment with Dr. B, and we come together twice a week on Sundays at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to read collectively. We read books that are empowering, enlightening, engaging, and elevating. Okay, and so things that call things to the forefront. They are not the books that are not scared to call things out, expose. We cannot heal what we refuse to reveal. We cannot heal what we are scared to provoke. The books that we read are quite provocative, to say the least. And I'm grateful for it, because in order for change to happen, we need to unveil it. We need to unveil the poison. We need to call out the cancers, okay? And that's exactly what we do. And in doing so, the book that we are reading, we had to pause. We did pause for a month for our sabbatical, our reset, but we are back at it. The book that we're reading is Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent, written by Isabel Wilkerson. This book, you all, is so timely. Actually, it's been out for a while, but it's timely for us collectively reading it now, because in now's time there's so much going on right now. There's so much going on in the world, in society, regarding the mass erasures, regarding the mass deportation, the oh my god, it's just so much racism, fascism, capitalism, the whole nine yards, the DEI stuff. And oh my Lord, it's so much population control. It's a lot going on. It is quite draining to say the least, but it's going on, and we cannot ignore it anymore. We just simply can't. We can't keep acting like it's not happening. We can't. We are here. All right. We are here. We are present. We are a part of this society, this country, this planet, this, this galaxy. We're a part of this, and we can no longer turn a blind eye. We just can't. Okay. And if we choose to do so, then we're complicit. That's just what it is. Okay. And so, with that being said, we've been reading through this book, and it's been highlighting, first of all, some of the things that has happened over the years, like where this poison even began, the origins of our discontents. Where did it begin? How do we get here? How do we get here? And that is what I call GPS 101. GPS 101. Because just like you with your GPS, when you are looking to head somewhere, what you're going to do is you're going to type in your destination, but typing in where you want to go is not going to activate the route and the journey. You first have to identify where you are, right? And for us in this life and society, we got to identify where we currently are. And most times, in order to pinpoint where we are, we got to go back to what happened, where we started, our genesis in this discontent. We all know we want unification. We want togetherness. We want one race, one body, one mind, one. We all are. And I think that's the problem because a lot of us don't see it that way. We are one of one as one. We've never not been. But unfortunately, skin and skin color has caused a divide. Skin and paper, money, and titles and geographical locations, pedigree has caused a divide, has enabled some to say that they're better than others, or some to judge others as less than. Unfortunately, when we are one of one as one. And so, um, our ultimate goal is to become one again, right? However, we got to first call out the poison. We got to cut the poison out, and we have to expose. We have to have the hard conversations. And that's what this is, the hard conversation. This book is the hard conversation, okay? So we ended part 4 in chapter 18 the last time we gathered together. Now we're beginning part 5. I'm going to tell you, for those who have the book, that's good. I'm thankful that you have the book. Those who don't have the book and would like the book, every book that we read collectively, it is free of charge. We are a nonprofit organization, 501c3, and so we, of course, we take donations. We do receive them, and we thank you for them. They are welcome. They are not required for you to have the reading material. If you like the book and you want to receive the book for free, I will send it to you I'm sorry. I will send it to you personally. I don't know why my tongue did not want to cooperate at that moment, but I will personally send it to you via email. You could just send me an inbox message. Let me know what email you want me to send it to, and I will forward it to you myself. Okay, at the end of the segment, obviously. And so, with that being said, we are going into chapter 19, part 5. Part 5 is entitled "The Consequences of Caste." Caste, CASTE, the consequences of caste. If you're listening and you would like to share it to others, then please feel free to do so. I thank you for that, spreading the word. If you just want to hear me in audible form, you can do that too. If you're doing other things and you want to multitask, go right ahead and do that. It's perfectly fine. At any point that you have if you hear anything that you want to add to, or it rang, it resonated with you, or whatever the case, use the chat and the comment section. That's what they're there for. Okay. I'm going to be reading on another screen. However, periodically I glance back and forth and I give voice to your words. Okay. So whatever you have to say and you want to add to the conversation, please feel free to do so. We are collective. It's not just about me. It is us here. Okay. All right, here we go. Chapter 19, the euphoria of hate. The film footage, black and white, rough against the wall onto which it is projected, unfolds in a continuing loop in a cave of a viewing room at a Berlin museum. It shoves, heaves, spits you back in time to Saturday, July 6, 1940, at precisely 3 p.m. There's no commentary explaining the footage. You are forced to absorb the horror of it in all of its banal pageantry on your own. Hitler is returning to Berlin after the Germans have seized Paris in the Battle of France. The camera captures his arrival at Anhalter station and follows the flower-strewn Strasses along the parade route to the Reich Chancellery. Hitler's motorcade winds past people who are not just hurling confetti, but are so tightly packed together that they themselves look like mounds of confetti thrown by the wind. Soldiers have to hold back the smiling, crying women, as would happen at Beatles concerts or at generations from this moment. The roar of the crowd is not recognizably human, but the rolling crash of the ocean's waves that precede and then batter the shore again. Church bells ring in the distance. The children and the men and the women flutter their own Nazi flags like bird wings. The camera closes in, and you can begin to make out the individual hails, the male hails from the high-pitched female hails. A boy is hoisted on a street sign, waving and hailing. A little girl is on a parent's shoulder, hailing. Soldiers' heels press against the soil to keep their footing against the crowd. Their jackboots braced against women's pumps, the women swooning and pushing, the soldiers grinning at the futility of holding back Hitler's screaming fans in a light-hearted tussle between pants cuffs and stockinged calves. The camera cuts to the balcony and to the object of the throng's uncontained rapture. You see him first from behind, the silhouette of Hitler set against a million dots that are his jubilant fans. He stands like a statue, arms rigidly forward. He leans over the balcony and lets escape a smile of satisfaction. You recall that you have never seen an image of evil smiling, a quarter second of human emotion. He surveys the waving, cheering base of his power and nods. This is good, the look on his face is saying. People laugh in reverie, jubilation all around, from the balcony and along the parade route and on the packed plats where it appears that every German alive has managed to squeeze themselves in. So many that they are fairly holding one another up and jumping and waving their Nazi flags. A million Nazi flags. The motorcade had only minutes ago wound beneath Nazi banners a story high, blowing from above on both sides of the street. Every few feet, a Nazi banner, rows and rows for miles. This is the worship service of the true believers, looking now like mounds of pebbles on a beach, a million indistinguishable bees in a hive. The film played in a loop on the wall without comment. None was necessary. I sat mesmerized and repulsed, sickened but unable to get up. Perhaps if I stayed long enough, I might begin to comprehend it. In that moment, you are face to face with the force of willing susceptibility to evil. The Nazis could not have risen to power and done what they did without the support of the masses of people who were open to his spell. I could not stop watching it. The smiling, shining faces in this carpet of exuberant humanity. This massive number of people could not all be what we would consider evil. They are husbands, wives, mothers, fathers, children, uncles, nephews, all gathered at a ticker tape parade on a brilliant sunny day, celebrating what we know to be a horror. I thought to myself, did the German people know the carnage they are celebrating? Carnage they are celebrating? Yes, it turns out. Clips of bombing raids were shown during newsreels before the feature film at the cinema. They knew that the French had been violently defeated. It was 2 years past Kristallnacht. They knew that Jewish friends and families and neighbors had been rounded up, publicly humiliated, taken away, never seen again. And the people in the crowd were smiling and happy. Everything that happened to the Jews of Europe, to the African Americans during the lynching terrors of Jim Crow, to Native Americans as their land was plundered and their numbers disseminated, to Dalits considered so low that their very shadow polluted those deemed above them, happened because a big enough majority had been persuaded and had been open to being persuaded centuries ago and in the recent past that these groups were ordained by God as beneath them, subhuman, deserving of their fate. Those gathered on that day in Berlin were neither good nor bad. They were human, insecure, and susceptible to the propaganda that gave them an identity to believe in, to feel chosen and important. What would any of us have done had we been in their places? How many people actually go up against so great a tide of seeming inevitability? How many can see the evil for what it is, as it is occurring? Who has the courage to stand up to the multitudes in the face of a charismatic demigod who makes you feel better about yourself, part of something bigger than yourself that you have been primed to believe? Every last one of us would now say to ourselves, I would never have attended such an event. I would never have attended a lynching. I would never have stood by, much less cheered, as a fellow human was dismembered and set on fire here in America. And yet tens of thousands of everyday humans did just that in the lifetime of the oldest among us in Germany, in India, in the American South. This level of cold hearted disconnection did not happen overnight. It built up over generations of insecurities and resentments. Some of the witnesses and participants who hailed Hitler and laughed at humans being tortured in the Jim Crow South are still alive, cradling grandchildren to their bosom. The camera in Berlin panned the crowd and fixed its lens on the children, a little girl with a blonde page boy and a barrette in her hand, hailing Hitler, hoisted on her parents' shoulders. She would be about 80 now, and this could be one of the earliest memories she carries inside her as a human being. Germany bears witness to an uncomfortable truth that evil is not one person, but can be easily activated in more people than we would like to believe when the right conditions congeal. It is easy to say, if we could just root out the despots before they take power or intercept their rise, if we could just wait until the bigots die away. It is much harder to look into the darkness in the hearts of ordinary people with unquiet minds, needing someone to feel better than, whose cheers and votes allow despots anywhere in the world to rise in power in the first place. It is harder to focus on the danger of common will, the weaknesses of the human immune system, the ease with which the toxins can infect succeeding generations, because it means the enemy, the threat, is not one man. It is us, all of us, lurking in humanity itself. That is so true. At any given moment, you could be standing next to someone who absolutely hates your guts and would never know it. Policemen, doctors. What's crazy is I moved to Tennessee May 31st, and it wasn't 2 weeks later. I read a report, an article about Tennessee, the law in Tennessee that allows doctors here to not provide service and care to someone if they do not believe in their lifestyle. So if you're part of LGBTQIA+, you can be denied care because the doctor don't agree with your lifestyle. So forget the fact that you need care. Forget the fact that you are human and you need care. The fact that the doctor says he don't agree with you, you could possibly be denied care. If you are Black or a minority of any race, and the doctor is Caucasian and he doesn't like Black people or minorities, you could be denied care, and it will be lawful. I learned that and was mind blown. So like I said, you could be sitting in front of, sitting on the chair with, being judged by, being handled by, being taught by someone who hates the very sight of you and would never know it. Chapter 20, the inevitable narcissism of caste. Through no fault of any individual born to it, a caste system centers the dominant caste as the sun around which all other castes revolve and defines it as the default setting standard of normalcy, of intellect, of beauty, against which all others are measured, ranked in descending order by their physiological proximity to the dominant caste. They are surrounded by images of themselves, from serial commercials to sitcoms, as deserving, hardworking, and superior in most aspects of American life. And it would be the rare person who would not absorb the constructing centrality of the dominant group. It would be the rare outliers who would go out of their way to experience the world from the perspective of those considered below them, or even to think about them one way or the other. And the caste system does not require it of them. Society builds a trap door of self-reference that, without any effort on the part of the people in the dominant caste, unwittingly forces on them a narcissistic isolation from those assigned to the lower categories. It replicates the structure of narcissistic family systems, the interplay of competing supporting roles, the golden child, middle caste of so called modern model minorities, the lost child indigenous people, and the scapegoat caste of, at the bottom. The centrality of the dominant caste is not lost on those considered beneath them in the hierarchy. The highest and lowest rungs are seen as so far apart as to seem planted in place, immovable. Thus, those straddling the middle may succumb to the greatest angst and uncertainty as they aspire to a higher rung. Everyone in the caste system is trained to covet proximity to the dominant caste. An Iranian immigrant feeling the need to mention that a relative had blonde hair as a child. A second generation child of Caribbean immigrants quick to clarify that they are Jamaican and categorically not African American. A Mexican immigrant boasting that one of his grandfathers back in Mexico looked just like an American. Blonde hair and blue eyes, at which point he was reminded by an African American that Americans come in all colors of hair and eyes. Those accustomed to being the measure of all that is human can come to depend on the reassurance that while they may have troubles in their lives, at least they are not at the bottom. As long as the designated bottom dwellers remain in their designated place, their own identities and futures are secure. No matter how degraded their lives, white people are still allowed to believe that they possess the blood, the genes, the patrimony of superiority. No matter what happens, they can never become black, wrote the sociologist Andrew Hacker. White Americans of all classes have found it comforting to preserve blacks as a subordinate caste, a presence that, despite all its pain and problems, still provides whites with some solace in a stressful world. We are accustomed to the concept of narcissism, a complex condition of self aggrandizing, entitlement, and disregard of others, growing out of a hollow insecurity as it applies to individuals. But some scholars apply it to behavior of nations, tribes, and subgroups. Freud was among the earliest psychoanalysts who connect a psychiatric diagnosis to narcissus of Greek mythology, the son of the river god who fell in love with his own image in a pool of water, not realizing that it was he who was spurning his affection, died in despair. Narcissus could not conceive that he was in love with his own reflection, wrote the psychologist Elsa Remington. He was caught in an illusion. So too with groups trained to believe in their inherent sovereignty. The essence of this overestimation of one's own position and the hate for all who differ from it is a narcissism, wrote the psychologist and social theorist Eric Fromm. He is nothing, Fromm wrote. But if he can identify with his nation or can transfer his personal narcissism to the nation, then he is everything. A person deeply invested in his group's dominance, he has a euphoric, on top of the world feeling, while in reality, he is in a state of self inflation, Fromm wrote. This leads to severe distortion of his capacity to think and to judge. He and his are over evaluated. Everything outside is under evaluated. And underneath may lie the fear that he cannot live up to the constructed ideal of his own perfection. History has shown that nations and groups will conquer, colonize, enslave, and kill to maintain the illusion of their primacy. Their investment in this illusion gives them as much of a stake in the inferiority of those deemed beneath them as in their own presumed superiority. The survival of the group, Fromm wrote, depends to some extent on the fact that its members consider its importance as great or greater than that of their own lives, and furthermore, that they believe in the righteousness or even superiority of their group as compared to others. Thus, when under threat, they are willing to sacrifice themselves and their ideals for the survival of a group from which they draw their self esteem. The social theorist Takamichi Sakurai wrote bluntly, group narcissism leads people to fascism. An extreme form of group narcissism means malignant narcissism, which gives rise to a fanatical fascist politics and extreme racialism. In modern times, this kind of group narcissism has gripped two nations in particular, according to Fromm: the racial narcissism which existed in Hitler's Germany and which is found in American South. He wrote in 1964 at the height of the civil rights movement. Fromm well knew the perils of group narcissism from both his training in psychoanalysis and his personal experience. He was a German Jew who fled to Switzerland after the Nazis took power in Germany, and then to the United States in 1934. He saw firsthand the Nazis' appeals to the fears and insecurities of everyday Germans in the lead up to the Nazi takeover. If one examines the judgment of the poor whites regarding blacks, or the Nazis in regards to Jews, Fromm wrote, one can easily recognize the distorted character of their respective judgments. Little straws of truth are put together, but the whole which is thus formed consists of falsehoods and fabrications. If the political actions are based on narcissistic self glorifications, the lack of objectivity often leads to disastrous consequences. In both instances, Fromm thought the working class to be among the most susceptible, harboring an inflated image of itself as the most admirable group in the world, and of being superior to another racial group that is singled out as inferior, he wrote. A person in this group feels, even though I am poor and uncultured, I am somebody important because I belong to the most admirable group in the world. I am white, or I am Aryan. A group whipped into narcissistic fervor is eager to have a leader with whom it can identify, Fromm wrote. The leader is then admired by the group, which projects its narcissism onto him. The right kind of leader can inspire a symbiotic connection that the simplest logic. The susceptible group sees itself in the narcissistic leader, becomes one with the leader, sees his fortunes and his fate as their own. The greater the leader, Fromm wrote, the greater the follower. The narcissism of the leader who is convinced of his greatness and who has no doubts is precisely what attracts the narcissism of those who submit to him. Yeah, that is so very true. Caste behavior is essentially a response to one's assigned place in the hierarchy. According to the script that the culture hands us all, the dominant caste, whether man or woman, rich or poor, white or over black, Brahmin over Dalit, it is not to take instructions or even suggestions from the lower caste. The script decrees that the dominant caste must be right, more informed, more competent, first in all things. The caste system primes the dominant caste to experience discomfort, unfairness at the sight of a lower caste person in a position above their perceived station, and more particularly above them, and may feel the need to restore equilibrium by putting the lower caste person in their place. The dominant caste tends to resist comparison to lower caste people. Even the suggestion that they have anything in common or share basic human experiences, as this diminishes the dominant caste person and forces the contemplation of equality with someone deemed lower. A comparison forces the contemplation of that person's humanity, a source of internal conflict when confronted with injustice that society deems appropriate if the target is not seen as fully human as themselves. Years ago, a colleague fretted to me about his and his wife's worries about his father in law, who had recently had a health setback. The father in law lived in another state and was not as sharp as he once had been, might have fallen recently or suffered some other worrisome thought, though not life threatening development. My colleague lamented to me that his wife was going to have to make a trip many miles away to check on him, and she would perhaps have to look into assisted living. It was weighing on her and him. He was speaking directly to me, but his words seemed a general lament to the universe. He was facing an existential disruption that I could identify with. In the past, I had mentioned to him the challenges I had managing the care of my mother, who had been disabled years before. He had listened at the time with the detachment of those who have not yet faced the inevitable, who tell themselves, as we all do, that somehow we will escape what we know is coming. I told him I was sorry to hear that his family was going through this. I can understand, I told him. As you know, I said, I've been having to take care of my mother while being on the road, and I too had to look into assisted living for her. He seemed taken aback at the very suggestion that the situations might have anything whatsoever in common, as if this were tantamount in equating a giraffe from a kangaroo. The statement was seen as an insult to him and activated a deep seated programming. Why, you can't compare my father in law, he said, of the preposterousness of the idea, to your mother. In the unspoken rules of caste, the people in the dominant caste are expected to be first or in superior stations. Historically, their job is to be correct, direct, discipline, and police the people in the lower caste. They are to be ever vigilant to any rise or breach on the part of those beneath them. I had borne witness to this in the American caste system, but the more I spent among Indians, the more these caste rules became apparent to me, predictive even, in my interactions with people from the world's original caste system. I learned to recognize almost immediately the differences between dominant caste Indians and Dalits, even without the starker physical cues of dominant and subordinate castes in America. Indians wondered how I, as an outsider from a completely different culture, was able to distinguish them so quickly. I spoke none of the Indian languages, knew nothing of the Jatis, and was in no position to query anyone as to the section of village from which they came or recognize early the surnames that conveyed one's place in the caste system. I noticed first upper caste people tended to be lighter in complexion and sharper in features, though that is not an ironclad indicator. Secondly, I noticed that they were more likely to speak English with British diction, although that could be a sign of education and class as much as caste hierarchy. More revealingly and more consistently, I began to be able to distinguish people from their bearing and demeanor in accord with the universal script of caste. It was no accident that my caste radar worked more efficiently when there was a group of people interacting among themselves. Caste is, in a way, a performance, and I could detect the caste positions of people in a group, but not necessarily a single individual by themselves or herself, by himself or herself. There is never caste, the Dalit leader Ambekar once said, only castes. And so, at gatherings of Indians of different castes, I could see that the upper caste people took positions of authority, were forthright, at ease with being in charge, correcting and talking over the lower caste people. It echoed a similar dynamic in the United States, an expectation that an upper caste person must assert superiority of knowledge and intellect in all things. Having been socialized to be first and to be central, a pressure to be right, and the need to remind the lower caste person, subtly or not, of their history, cultural, spatial, and familiar inferiority. At a panel or seminar, they were often the ones leading the discussion or doing most of the talking. They tended to speak more formally, giving direction, heads held high. On the other hand, the Dalits, as if trained not to bring attention to themselves, sat in the shadows, on the periphery at a conference seminar, asking few questions, daring not, it seemed, to intrude upon an upper caste domain or conversation, even if the discussion was about them, which in fact it was. Even in the rarefied space of a scholarly presentation, when an upper caste person was correcting a lower caste person, the Dalit listened and took their admonishment without questioning. head often down or nodding that, yes, you are correct. I will go back now and do what you have said. I winced as I watched people talk down to scholars from the subordinate caste in an open forum. In India, it was Dalits who gravitated toward me like long lost relatives, surrounding me and propping themselves on a sofa near me for an impromptu subordinate caste tete a tete, tete a tete. Okay, tete a tete. I discovered that they wanted to hear from me, or I should say, commune with someone they recognized as a kindred spirit who shared a common condition. We read James Baldwin and Toni Morrison because they speak to our experiences, a Dalit scholar said to me. They help us in our plight. I was standing during a lunch break at a conference in Delhi. A Dalit scholar and I were communing about our kindred perspectives when an upper caste woman walked up and broke into the conversation to tell the Dalit woman what she should have included in her presentation, a point that she missed and which she would do well to include the next time. The upper caste woman interrupted us with a sense of entitlement, without excusing herself for breaking in, disregarding the conversation in progress, disregarding me, the person with whom the Dalit woman was talking, as if whatever we were saying could wait. She chided the Dalit scholar with an air of condescension and superiority and proceeded to instruct the Dalit scholar on the Dalit behavior that the Dalit scholar had researched and written about. She castigated her in front of me, and a complete stranger to both of them. I was there on a mission of my own, and an upper caste woman was making herself the center of someone else's conversation that was keeping me from my task. It evoked a convention of the American caste system that often places the word of a dominant caste person above the word of a subordinate caste person, even in matters that the subordinated person would be more likely to know about. For most of American history, African Americans were not permitted to sit on juries, for example, or to testify against a white person. Even in more recent times, accusations of racial discrimination often carry more weight if a dominant caste person vouches for it. Now, on the other side of the world, a dominant caste woman in India was presuming the same privilege in a parallel universe. In an American social justice circles, her castigation of the Dalit woman would be seen as a kind of Brahmin splaining, as with mansplaining and white splaining, a dominant caste person lecturing a subordinate caste person about something on which the subordinate caste person may, in fact, be an authority. When the upper caste woman left after making her points, it was hard to get our footing again. She had jarred us from our parallel caste communing. I asked the Dalit woman if she knew the woman who had just interrupted her, because she had spoken with such familiarity and comfort. No, the Dalit scholar said. You see, this is what happens. She just let me know that she was upper caste and above me. Though they may not recognize it on a conscious level, dominant caste Americans often show nearly as much curiosity about the ethnic and thus caste origins of their fellow Americans as do people in India. When Americans seek to locate themselves in the hierarchy, the line of inquiry may be more subtle and may not have the same life or death consequences as in India, but it is there. They will question a person whose race is ambiguous until they are satisfied of an origin. If descended from Western Europe, they might query an Italian American about their roots. What part of Italy? North or south? Countryside or city? Out of genuine interest or because they have visited or wish to, but also perhaps to locate them in the Southern European hierarchy. If a person is part Irish or part Czech, they might emphasize upon meeting someone the Irish grandfather rather than the Czech grandmother. A white person might describe him or herself as a mutt or as a Heinz 57, which handily obscures lineage outside of Northwestern Europe. The old eugenics hierarchy of presumed value still lurks beneath the surface. A woman whose grandparents immigrated from Poland might say to an Irish American whose status is perceived as higher than hers, that they came from Austria, justifying it to herself by recalling the shifting borders in the 20th century. But the same woman might admit that they came from Poland to an African American of presumed lower rank, whom she had no need to impress, her higher status secure and understood. Not long ago in Boston and Chicago and Cleveland, people spoke of white ethnics from Southern and Eastern Europe as political voting blocs. They distinguished the lace curtain Irish from the shanty Irish. Once at the end of a meeting in the Northeast a few years ago, a young white assistant in a room with black professionals was asked the routine question of how her name was spelled, which could have been Catherine with a K and a Y, Catherine with a C, Catherine with a K and I, or maybe Catherine with an A. She straightened her back and answered pertly, the English spelling, which seemed no answer at all and a curious bid to set herself apart from everyone else in the room, to pull rank with Anglo Saxony, which no actual Anglo Saxon would need to do. I thought to myself, and exactly what spelling would that be? Three white women were once catching up over dinner about people they had known for years, their conversation flowing along caste lines beyond conscious awareness. One woman of Irish descent brought up someone whose family, she pointed out, had arrived from Germany in the first half of the 20th century. This prompted a second woman to chime in that her family had come from Germany earlier. They arrived in the 1860s. Excuse me. The third woman brought up someone who had an unusual last name. The other two immediately asked its origins. Is it German? No, Danish, came the answer. They moved on to another acquaintance. Isn't his wife Spanish? One woman asked another. Oh, she's from a country in South America, another said, like Colombia or Venezuela. The conversation turned to the third woman and the strawberry colored hair of some of her relatives. The German American woman said they looked Irish. No, the third woman said, we're Nordic. The other two, the Irish American and the German American, fell silent. The conversation paused. Somehow, everyone in the room realized the power of the word Nordic in all of its ambiguous specificity. Ambiguous because it's not a country, specific in that it is a language inherited from early 20th century eugenics, passed down through culture and lore. No one asked which country her family had come from, Sweden, Norway, Finland, Iceland, or when they arrived. If one was Nordic, it did not matter. Nordic was a kind of label that in early decades preceded the word stock, as with Alpine stock or Iberic stock, on a now debunked scale of European races. Nordics and Anglo-Saxons were the two groups that had always been welcome in America. Nordic was what the drafters of the 1924 immigration law coveted. Nordic had inspired an entire ideology, Nordicism, which declared Nordics the most superior of all of the Aryans. Nordic was the region of Europe on which the 45th president of the United States seemed fixated nearly a century after the eugenics movement, and whose people he wished would immigrate to America instead of Mexicans, Muslims, and Haitians. The word shut down conversation momentarily. Nordic has long been at the top of the hierarchy, and after all these decades, it still trumped everyone in the room. Wow. Wow. That was the end of chapter 20. We will come together on Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to read chapter 21, entitled The German Girl with the Dark Wavy Hair. Okay? Again, we are reading through the book Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent, written by Isabel Wilkerson. If you like this book, like I said at the top of the segment, it is free of charge to you. Feel free to reach out to me and inbox me in any way, wherever you're listening from, just inbox me and with your email address that you like the it's a PDF, it's an ebook, forward it over to you and I will send it to you. You can email me at info@biancamissblee.com. Again, info@biancamissblee.com. You can visit the website too. Those on Clubhouse is right above my head. You just tap the link above me and you'll be right there. Those who are watching via video on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, it is on the screen. You can go right there and you can go to the website and you'll be able to see all that I offer, all that I do. You'll be able to see I am an astrologer as well, a master astrologer and a reader and things like that. So you'll be able to see the current transits, what we got going on. As of today, actually, we have the final eclipse, the final lunar eclipse in Pisces. I did a video explaining what that means and how you can harness the energy from it. Understand that although you may not understand what is happening and decipher the movements and the transits and things like that, aspects of the planets and what's going on, it is affecting you, whether you realize it or not. We are interconnected beings, okay? Understand that the Creator has created everything with a purpose attached to it. There is a reason why those planets are in the galaxy. There's a reason why the constellations are where they are. There's a reason why. There's a reason why we are rotating and shifting at the angles and degrees that we are, and it affects you, again, whether you realize it or not. So everyone is not privy to that, or is not supposed to be privy to all of the ins and outs and ups and downs. But those of us who are, that's why we educate you and make you aware of how it can benefit you. So feel free, please take a listen to it, understand it for yourself, draw from it, and connect with it. Okay, you're already connected to it on a subconscious level, on a spiritual level, energetic level. Consciously connect to it. Be more aware of what is around you. Okay. Alrighty, you all. Follow me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, all of the places at Dr. Bianca Miss B. Lee. Again, it's Dr. Bianca Miss B. Lee. Listen, you guys, this was awesome. I'm grateful for being back here. I'm thankful that we are here together. Once again, we're back on a regular scheduled program. You all take a listen. Join me tomorrow, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays on TikTok. Only on TikTok. Those segments are called The Talk with Doc. Okay. You want to join us? I promise you want to join us. We have a good time over there. Okay. So join us on The Talk with Doc. TikTok only, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it lasts to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so I don't keep you long. All right. But join us. Feel free. You want to join us. So you can let your head down. We have great conversation. Great togetherness. It is so much fun. And it's good. We learn a lot about each other, about ourselves, about society. We just learn a lot and we have good fun. Okay. So join us. All right. Alrighty, you all. You already know what it is. I love you. I mean it. There is absolutely positively nothing you can do about it. Don't you even try it. We'll be back here on Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Voices of Empowerment with Dr. B. Peace.